The dust kicked up behind the stagecoach as it barreled down the rutted trail towards Silvercreek, a small but growing town nestled between the foothills of the Colorado Rockies. Inside, Rebecca Thornton clutched her reticule with white-knuckled fingers, her heart pounding in her chest. The letter from her late father's attorney was tucked inside, along with the deed to a saloon she had never seen and had no desire to keep. 1 month, she promised herself. 1 month to sell the business, and then she would return to Boston, where she belonged. It was 1878, and Rebecca had never ventured west of the Mississippi before. At 24, she was considered practically a spinster back home, but here in the frontier, she knew women were scarce and often married young out of necessity rather than love, not that she was looking for a husband. She had dedicated herself to teaching music to the daughters of Boston's elite, finding satisfaction in her independence after her mother's passing 5 years prior. The stagecoach hit a particularly deep rut, jostling Rebecca from her thoughts. Across from her sat an older couple who had been kind enough during the journey but were clearly as exhausted as she was after days of travel. "First time out west, miss?" the gentleman asked, noticing her tension. "Yes," Rebecca admitted, attempting to straighten her travel-worn dress. "I've inherited a business in Silvercreek. I plan to sell it as quickly as possible and return home." The man's wife leaned forward. "Silvercreek, why, that town's growing faster than dandelions in spring. What sort of business?" Rebecca hesitated. "A saloon, the Silver Dollar." The couple exchanged looks that Rebecca couldn't quite decipher. "The Silver Dollar, you say?" The man stroked his beard. "That's one of the more reputable establishments in town. Your father must have been James Thornton." Rebecca nodded, surprised. "You knew him, knew of him." "Decent man by all accounts, kept a fair business, died rather sudden, I heard." "Yes," Rebecca said softly, "heart trouble according to the letter I received." The stagecoach began to slow and Rebecca peered out the window. Buildings came into view, mostly wooden structures with false fronts, some painted, others weathered to a silver gray. The street was busy with horses, wagons, and people going about their business. It was nothing like Boston with its brick buildings and cobblestone streets, but it had a certain vitality she hadn't expected. As the coach rolled to a stop in front of the station, Rebecca took a deep breath. "Well, it appears we've arrived." The driver opened the door. "Silvercreek Station." "All out for Silvercreek?" Rebecca gathered her valise and stepped down carefully, mindful of the mud puddles dotting the street. The smell hit her immediately: horses, dust, wood smoke, and something indefinably Western. She stood uncertainly on the boardwalk as the driver unloaded her trunk. "Miss Thornton," a voice called from nearby. Rebecca turned to see an older man approaching, dressed in a suit that had seen better days but was well maintained. He removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. "Yes, I'm Rebecca Thornton. Harold Winters, madam, your father's attorney. I wrote to you about the inheritance." He extended his hand, which Rebecca shook briefly. "I'm mighty pleased you decided to come in person rather than handling matters by post." "I felt it necessary to see the property before selling," Rebecca explained. "I hope to conclude business quickly, Mr." Winters nodded, though something in his expression suggested disappointment. "Of course. I've arranged lodging for you at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. It's the most respectable in town. I thought you might want to rest before seeing the saloon." "That's very thoughtful, but I'd prefer to see the establishment first. I've come all this way after all." Mr. Winters hesitated. "As you wish. It's just down the street. I can have your belongings sent to Mrs. Peterson's while we go." As they walked along the wooden sidewalk, Rebecca observed the town with curious eyes. There were several stores, a bank, a church under construction, and various other businesses. People nodded politely as they passed, many openly staring at her Boston attire. "Your father was well respected here," Mr. Winters said as they walked. "He came out west about 15 years ago, started with nothing but built the Silver Dollar into one of the finest establishments this side of Denver." "I barely knew him," Rebecca admitted. "He and my mother separated when I was very young. He sent funds and wrote occasionally, but we hadn't seen each other in many years." I'm sorry to hear that. He spoke of you often, though, kept a photograph on his desk. This surprised Rebecca. Her father had always seemed like a distant figure, almost a stranger. The idea that he had displayed her picture touched something deep within her. They stopped in front of a two-story building with large windows on the ground floor. A sign hanging above the door depicted a silver dollar coin and the words "The Silver Dollar Saloon" in elaborate lettering. The building was painted a deep green with gold trim, standing out among the more plainly constructed businesses nearby. "Here we are," Mr. Winters said. "Your father took great pride in this place." Rebecca stared at the building, trying to reconcile the elegant facade with her preconceived notions of a rough Western saloon. "It's not what I expected." James was particular about appearances. Said a respectable establishment attracted respectable customers. Mr. Winters opened the door. "Shall we?" Inside, the saloon was cool and dim after the bright sunlight. Rebecca's eyes adjusted to see a long, polished bar along one wall, tables spread throughout the room, and a small stage in the corner with a piano. Everything was clean and well maintained, from the gleaming glassware behind the bar to the polished floor. A man was wiping down the bar, his back to them. At the sound of the door, he turned, and Rebecca's breath caught momentarily. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was tanned from the sun, with strong features and startlingly blue eyes. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms. "Mr. Winters." The man nodded, then his gaze fell on Rebecca. Something flickered in those blue eyes, surprise followed by curiosity. "Samuel Dean, this is Miss Rebecca Thornton, James's daughter, Mr." Winters introduced them. "Miss Thornton, Samuel was your father's right-hand man, been running the place since James took ill." Samuel put down his cloth and came around the bar, extending his hand. "Miss Thornton, your father spoke of you often. I'm sorry for your loss." Rebecca took his hand briefly, feeling a strange jolt at the contact. His grip was firm but gentle. "Thank you, Mr. Dean. I understand you've been managing the saloon." "Yes, madam. Your father trusted me to keep things running." There was pride in his voice, but no arrogance. "He was a good man and a fair employer." Rebecca nodded, unsure how to respond. She moved away to examine the room more closely. The tables were of good quality, the chairs sturdy. Behind the bar hung a large mirror, uncracked and clear. The whole place spoke of care and attention to detail. "The Silver Dollar isn't just a saloon," Samuel said, seemingly reading her thoughts. "We serve food during the day, best meals in town. Evenings we have music, sometimes dancing. It's a gathering place for the whole community." "I see." Rebecca ran her finger along the bar top, finding it immaculately clean. "And do you have women who work here?" She tried to phrase the question delicately. Samuel's expression hardened slightly. "If you're asking about sporting women, no, your father didn't allow that sort of business. We have female servers and a cook, all respectable." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "I apologize for the assumption." "No need," Samuel's expression softened. "It's a fair question in these parts, but the Silver Dollar's always been different. It's why folks respect it, and your father." Mr. Winters cleared his throat. "Perhaps you'd like to see the books, Miss Thornton. Your father was meticulous with his record-keeping." "Yes, that would be helpful." Rebecca was eager to understand the value of the business for selling purposes. Samuel led them to a small office at the back of the saloon. It was tidy, with a desk, filing cabinet, and a safe in the corner. A leather-bound ledger sat on the desk, next to a framed photograph. Rebecca picked it up and felt her heart constrict. It was her, taken about 5 years ago before her mother's passing. "He had that sent from Boston," Samuel said quietly, "kept it where he could see it every day." Rebecca set the photograph down, strangely moved. She had always assumed her father had forgotten about her and her mother once he headed west. This evidence of his continued affection was unexpected. Samuel opened the ledger. "The Silver Dollar's been profitable every month for the past 8 years. Your father ran a tight ship, but he was fair. People trust this place." Rebecca examined the neat columns of figures, noting the consistent profits. "And you've maintained this standard since taking over?" Yes, madam, I've followed his methods to the letter. Rebecca nodded, impressed despite herself. Mr. Winters mentioned you were my father's right-hand man. How long have you worked here? 10 years. Started as security, this place used to need it more. Your father took me under his wing, taught me the business side. Last few years, I've helped manage everything. And what is your position now exactly? Samuel exchanged a glance with Mr. Winters. According to your father's will, I'm part owner. He left me a 20% share. Rebecca stared at him in surprise. She hadn't been informed of this detail. I see, Mr. Winters failed to mention that in his letter. The attorney looked uncomfortable. I thought it best to explain the particulars in person, Miss Thornton. The remaining 80% is yours, along with full ownership of the building. Rebecca frowned, realizing this complicated her plans to sell quickly. Does your partial ownership include any say in whether the business can be sold? Samuel's jaw tightened slightly. Your father included a clause that gives me first right to purchase your share if you decide to sell. At fair market value, of course. And do you have the means to do so, Mr. Dean? Rebecca asked directly. Not at present for the full 80%, Samuel admitted, but I've been saving. Given some time, I could arrange financing for a substantial portion. Rebecca considered this information. How much time would you need? 6 months, perhaps. I'd need to speak with the bank. 6 months. The thought of remaining in this dusty frontier town for half a year made Rebecca's heart sink. She had her teaching position to return to, her comfortable life in Boston. I had hoped to conclude business much more quickly, she said carefully. Samuel's blue eyes held her steadily. Miss Thornton, this place meant everything to your father. He built it from nothing. I understand you have a life elsewhere, but I'd ask you to at least give the silver dollar a chance before deciding its fate. Something in his earnest tone gave her pause. What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Dean? Stay for a while, see how the place runs. Get to know the business your father created, the community he served. Then decide. Rebecca hesitated. The logical part of her mind insisted that staying even a day longer than necessary was foolish. Yet something curiosity, perhaps, or some sense of obligation to the father she barely knew made her consider his request. I'll think about it, she finally said. For now, I'd like to see where my father lived. Of course, Samuel nodded. There's an apartment upstairs, your father's quarters. Would you like to see it now? Rebecca agreed, and Samuel led her to a private staircase at the back of the building. The apartment was modest but comfortable, a sitting room, bedroom, small kitchen, and bathroom with modern plumbing that surprised Rebecca. Your father was progressive about certain comforts, Samuel explained, noting her reaction to the bathroom. Had running water installed 2 years ago, one of the first buildings in town to have it. The rooms were neat but clearly masculine in decor. Dark furniture, practical arrangements, few decorative touches. On the mantel above a small fireplace were more photographs, one of a much younger Rebecca and her mother, another of the saloon's exterior on what appeared to be opening day, and several of James with various people, including Samuel. Rebecca picked up the photo of herself and her mother. He kept so many reminders of us. He missed you both, Samuel said quietly, talked about you often, was proud of your accomplishments. He knew about my teaching, Rebecca asked, surprised. Yes, madam. Had newspaper clippings whenever your students performed in concerts. Said you had your mother's musical talent. Rebecca set down the photograph, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. The father she thought had abandoned them had apparently followed her life from afar, proud of her achievements. It didn't erase the years of absence, but it changed something in how she viewed him. I think I'd like to go to the boarding house now, she said. It's been a long journey, Samuel nodded. Of course, I hope you'll come back tomorrow. The saloon opens at noon for the lunch crowd. As they descended the stairs, Rebecca's mind whirled with new information and conflicting emotions. She had come west with a singular purpose to sell her inheritance and return home as quickly as possible. Now she found herself curious about the business her father had built, the life he had led, and this man who had clearly meant so much to him. Mr. Winters escorted her to the boarding house, a neat 2-story home with a small garden in front. Mrs. Peterson, the proprietress, was a plump, friendly woman who showed Rebecca to a pleasant room on the second floor. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, Mrs. Peterson explained. Supper's at 6 sharp. We've got another lady boarder, a schoolteacher, and a gentleman who works at the bank. All very respectable. Thank you, Rebecca said, setting her valise on the bed. Her trunk had already been delivered and sat in the corner of the room. I heard you're James Thornton's daughter, Mrs. Peterson said, lingering in the doorway. He was well liked in this town, did a lot of good. So I'm gathering, Rebecca replied. Did you know him well? Well enough. My late husband and I came to Silvercreek around the same time James did. This was a rough place back then. James helped civilize it, you might say. His saloon was always respectable, even in the early days. Rebecca nodded, filing away this additional piece of information about her father. And Mr. Dean, Samuel, did you know him as well? Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. Samuel, Lord, yes, he came here as a young man, barely more than a boy. Had a troubled past, from what I understand, but James saw something in him, took him under his wing. Samuel's turned into one of the finest men in town. A troubled past, Rebecca couldn't help asking. It's not my story to tell, Mrs. Peterson said firmly. But I will say this: Samuel Dean is respected by everyone in Silvercreek. Your father trusted him completely, and James Thornton wasn't a man to give his trust easily. After Mrs. Peterson left, Rebecca unpacked her trunk and changed into a fresh dress. She sat by the window, looking out at the main street of Silvercreek. It was busy with activity, horses and wagons passing, people going about their business. So different from Boston, yet with its own kind of energy. Rebecca's thoughts turned to Samuel Dean. There was something compelling about him, a quiet strength, an integrity she sensed rather than could explain. The way he spoke about her father suggested deep respect and genuine affection, and those blue eyes. She shook her head, pushing the thought away. She wasn't here to notice blue eyes or broad shoulders. She was here to sell a business and return to her real life. Yet Samuel's words echoed in her mind. Stay for a while, see how the place runs, get to know the business your father created. Perhaps there was wisdom in that suggestion. She knew almost nothing about the saloon's operations or value. Spending a little time understanding the business would help her negotiate a better sale price, whether to Samuel or another buyer. Rebecca made her decision. She would stay for 1 month, no longer. She would learn about the silver dollar, about her father's life here, and then she would sell and return to Boston where she belonged. With that resolution firmly in mind, she began preparing for dinner, unaware that her carefully laid plans were already beginning to shift beneath her feet. The next morning, Rebecca woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the unfamiliar sounds of a frontier town coming to life. After dressing in one of her simpler dresses, a blue cotton that seemed more practical for Western life than her Boston finery, she made her way downstairs for breakfast. The other boarders were already at the table: Miss Collins, the schoolteacher, a slight woman with intelligent eyes, and Mr. Porter, the bank clerk, a balding man in his 40s. Both were polite if somewhat reserved, clearly curious about the newcomer but too well-mannered to pry openly. "Will you be staying in Silvercreek long, Miss Thornton?" Miss Collins asked as they ate Mrs. Peterson's excellent hot cakes. "I'm not certain yet," Rebecca replied. "I've inherited my father's business and need to decide what to do with it." "The Silver Dollar," Mr. Porter nodded. "Fine establishment. Your father ran a respectable place, not like some of the other saloons in town." "You've been there?" Rebecca asked. "Occasionally for lunch or an evening of cards. Many businessmen do. The food is excellent and the atmosphere congenial. Samuel Dean has maintained your father's high standards." Rebecca considered this as she finished her breakfast. "I plan to visit today to learn more about the operations." "A wise decision," Miss Collins said, "though unconventional for a lady to involve herself in such a business." There was no judgment in her tone, merely observation, but Rebecca felt defensive nonetheless. "I have no intention of involving myself long-term. I merely wish to understand what I'm selling." "Of course," Miss Collins nodded. "I meant no offense. In fact, I admire your practical approach. Too many women would simply allow male advisors to handle everything without understanding the details themselves. Rebecca warmed to the schoolteacher, recognizing a kindred independent spirit. "Are you from the East originally, Miss Collins?" "Philadelphia," she confirmed. "I came west 3 years ago when the town advertised for a teacher. It was an adjustment, but I've grown fond of Silvercreek." After breakfast, Rebecca walked to the Silver Dollar. The morning was pleasant, with clear blue skies and a crispness to the air that reminded her it was early autumn. The town looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, more alive with possibility. The saloon was not yet open, but the door was unlocked. Rebecca entered to find several people busy with morning preparations. A woman in her 50s was directing a young man as they arranged tables, while another woman emerged from what must be the kitchen carrying linens. They all looked up at Rebecca's entrance, their expressions showing surprise and curiosity. "Good morning," Rebecca said, feeling suddenly awkward. "I'm Rebecca Thornton." The older woman's face lit with recognition. "Miss Thornton, James's daughter, we've been hoping you'd come by." She approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Martha Weber. I've been cooking here for 12 years. This is my son, Thomas, and that's Jenny Miller, one of our servers." "It's a pleasure to meet you all," Rebecca said, genuinely meaning it. These people had known her father far better than she had. "Samuel mentioned you might be stopping by," Martha continued. "He's in the office, going over orders. Shall I fetch him for you? Please don't trouble yourself. I can find my way." Rebecca made her way to the back office, knocking lightly on the door. "Come in," Samuel's deep voice called. He was seated at the desk, ledgers and papers spread before him. He looked up, and that same flicker of something pleasure, crossed his face when he saw her. "Miss Thornton," he stood quickly. "Good morning. I wasn't sure you'd come." "I decided your suggestion had merit," Rebecca said. "I should understand what I'm selling before I sell it." Samuel gestured to a chair across from the desk. "I'm glad to hear it. What would you like to know first?" Rebecca seated herself, arranging her skirts. "Everything, I suppose, how the business operates day to day, who works here, what makes it profitable." Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "You're direct. Your father was the same way. Was he?" Rebecca hadn't expected to share any traits with a man she barely remembered. "Yes, never one to dance around a subject." Samuel smiled slightly. "All right, I'll give you the overview. The Silver Dollar operates in 3 phases each day. From noon until about 5, we're primarily a restaurant and meeting place. Martha's cooking draws people from all over town, businessmen, families, travelers passing through. We serve standard fare but of good quality. Families come here to a saloon." Rebecca couldn't hide her surprise. "During daylight hours, yes. Your father wanted a place that served the whole community, not just men looking for whiskey. From 5 until about 8, we're transitional, some dining, some drinking, usually quieter. After 8 is when we become more of a traditional saloon, drinks, card games, sometimes music. We close at midnight, earlier than most places. Your father believed nothing good happens after midnight in a drinking establishment." Rebecca nodded, impressed by the business model. "And your staff?" "Martha's our cook best in 3 counties. Her son Thomas helps with heavy lifting, stocking, security when needed. We have 3 regular servers, Jenny, whom you saw outside, Sarah and Olivia. All respectable women, paid fair wages. William tends bar in the evenings. I help wherever needed and manage the business side of things." "And what exactly is your background, Mr. Dean? How did you come to work for my father?" Samuel hesitated, and Rebecca wondered if she touched on the troubled past Mrs. Peterson had mentioned. "I was passing through Silvercreek in '68, he finally said. "I'd been working as a ranch hand, sometimes a trail driver. I was young, restless, got into a fight with some fellows at another saloon. Your father intervened before the sheriff arrived. Instead of letting me get thrown in jail, he offered me a job as security, said I could fight, might as well get paid for it." He smiled at the memory. "I expected to move on after a few months, never did. And he taught you the business?" "Yes. He saw I had a head for numbers, started teaching me the books, eventually trusted me with more responsibility." Last few years, we were partners in all but name. When he changed his will to leave me a percentage, it wasn't a surprise to anyone who knew us. Rebecca absorbed this information. You must have been like a son to him. Something flickered in Samuel's eyes, pain, perhaps. He was more of a father to me than my own ever was, taught me everything I know about business, about treating people right. A sudden commotion from the main room interrupted their conversation. Raised voices, then the sound of something breaking. Samuel was on his feet instantly, moving with surprising speed for such a large man. Rebecca followed, curious and concerned. In the main room, two men were facing off. One was Thomas, Martha's son. The other was a stranger to Rebecca, a rough-looking man with a week's growth of beard and bloodshot eyes. A broken bottle lay on the floor between them. I told you, Mr. Harding, we're not open yet, Thomas was saying, his voice steady but tense. Come back at noon. And I told you I want a damn drink now, the man Harding slurred. Clearly he was already intoxicated despite the early hour. Samuel stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. Problem here, Thomas. Mr. Harding wants service. Told him we don't open till noon. Samuel nodded, then addressed the drunk. You heard him, Harding. We open at noon. Come back then if you're sober. Harding's bloodshot eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you to tell me when I can drink? This is a saloon, ain't it? It's a business with hours, Samuel replied calmly. And right now we're closed. Harding's gaze shifted, landing on Rebecca, who stood a few paces behind Samuel. A leering grin spread across his face. Well now, what have we here? New girl, bit fancy for these parts, but I ain't picky. Rebecca stiffened, offended and a little frightened by the man's obvious misapprehension about her role in the establishment. Samuel moved subtly, positioning himself more directly between Rebecca and Harding. His voice remained level, but there was steel beneath the calm tone. That's Miss Thornton, the owner's daughter and the new proprietor. You'll show her respect or you'll find yourself permanently unwelcome at the Silver Dollar, Harding snorted. A woman running a saloon, that'll be the day. That day is today, Samuel replied. Now you have two choices. Leave peacefully and come back at noon when we're open, or leave permanently. Your decision. Something in Samuel's steady gaze must have penetrated the man's alcohol-fogged brain. After a tense moment, Harding spat on the floor, mumbled something uncomplimentary, and staggered toward the door. Sorry about that, Miss Thornton, Thomas said once Harding had gone. He's been trouble before. Not your fault, Thomas, Samuel assured him. Get that mess cleaned up before we open, please. As Thomas moved to fetch a broom, Samuel turned to Rebecca. Are you all right? I apologize you had to witness that. I'm fine, Rebecca said, though in truth the confrontation had unsettled her. Does that happen often, occasionally? Less now than in the early days. Your father established a reputation for not tolerating troublemakers. Most folks respect that. You handled him well, Rebecca observed. Without violence. Violence is a last resort. Words usually work better. Samuel glanced at the door. Harding's mostly bluster. Some men can't handle their liquor and need reminding of the boundaries. Rebecca studied Samuel with new appreciation. He'd been calm but authoritative, diffusing the situation without escalating it. She suspected he could have physically removed Harding if necessary, but his presence alone had been enough. Perhaps we should continue our conversation, Samuel suggested. As they returned to the office, Rebecca found herself revising her impression of Samuel Dean. There was clearly more to him than she'd initially assumed, a complexity that intrigued her despite her determination to remain detached from this place and its people. The next few hours passed quickly as Samuel explained the financial aspects of the business. Rebecca, who had managed her own modest finances since her mother's death, asked intelligent questions that clearly impressed him. By the time the saloon opened for the lunch crowd, she had a much clearer understanding of the Silver Dollar's operations and profitability. Would you care to stay for lunch? Samuel asked. Martha's beef stew is legendary in these parts. Rebecca hesitated. She hadn't planned to be so public in her first days in town, but curiosity won out. I'd like that, thank you. Samuel led her to a small table near the back, partially screened from the main room by a decorative wooden partition. This was your father's table. He liked to observe without being obvious about it. Rebecca sat, taking in the surprisingly busy lunchtime crowd. Martha's son, Thomas, showed a family with two well-behaved children to a table. Businessmen occupied several others. A few women were present as well, seeming perfectly comfortable in the environment. "Not what you expected?" Samuel asked, noting her surprise. "Not at all," Rebecca admitted. "In Boston, respectable women wouldn't enter a saloon." "Your father worked hard to make this a place where everyone felt welcome during the day. He believed a business that excluded half the population was leaving money on the table." Samuel smiled. He was practical that way. A young woman approached their table, Jenny, the server Rebecca had met earlier. "What can I get you, Mr. Dean? Miss Thornton?" "2 bowls of Martha's stew, please, Jenny, and coffee." As Jenny departed, Rebecca observed the easy interaction between Samuel and the staff. There was clear respect there, but also a comfortable familiarity that spoke of a well-functioning team. "How many of the staff knew my father well?" she asked. "All of them." "Martha the longest. She started cooking here when your father first opened. William's been tending bar for 8 years. The servers are newer, but even Jenny's been here 3 years. And they're all staying on, even with the change in ownership," Samuel nodded. "They're loyal to the silver dollar and to your father's memory. They're curious about you, of course." "What have you told them about me?" "Just that you're here to decide what to do with your inheritance, that you have a life back east." Rebecca met his gaze. "I do have a life back east, Mr. Dean, a teaching position I enjoy, friends, community." "Samuel," he corrected gently, "and I understand that. No one expects you to abandon your life for a business you never asked to own." Jenny returned with their stew and coffee. The rich aroma made Rebecca's stomach growl, reminding her she hadn't eaten since breakfast. The first spoonful confirmed Samuel's praise. The stew was delicious, with tender beef and vegetables in a savory broth. "This is wonderful," she commented. "Told you," Samuel smiled. "Martha could work in any fine restaurant, but she prefers it here. Says your father gave her a chance when no one else would." "What do you mean?" Samuel hesitated. "Martha was widowed young with a small son. In those days, Silvercreek wasn't kind to women without men. Your father hired her when others wouldn't. Gave her and Thomas rooms above the stables out back until they could afford better." Rebecca felt a rush of unexpected pride in this father she barely knew. "He seems to have helped many people." "He believed in second chances," Samuel said simply. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. Rebecca watched the room, noticing how the servers interacted with customers, how efficient the operation seemed. "You mention music sometimes," she said, nodding toward the piano in the corner. "Who plays?" "Various folks. William's pretty good. Sometimes we hire a fellow who comes through town every few months, plays piano and fiddle. Your father mentioned you were musical. He was proud of your teaching." Rebecca glanced at the piano with interest. "I teach piano primarily, some voice." "Perhaps you'd play sometime during your stay," Samuel suggested. "I'd wager it's a far sight better than the playing we usually hear." Before Rebecca could respond, the saloon door opened and a well-dressed man entered. He spotted Samuel and made his way directly to their table. "Dean," he nodded, then turned to Rebecca with obvious interest. "And you must be Miss Thornton. Robert Morgan at your service." He extended his hand, which Rebecca shook briefly. "I own the mercantile down the street." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Morgan," Rebecca replied politely. "When I heard James Thornton's daughter had arrived in Silvercreek, I had to meet you myself." His smile was practiced, his manner smooth. "I knew your father, of course, fine businessman. His passing was a great loss to our community." "Thank you," Rebecca said. Something about the man's overly familiar manner made her uncomfortable. "I understand you're considering selling the silver dollar," Morgan continued. "I wanted to let you know I'd be very interested in discussing terms should you decide to sell. I've been looking to diversify my investments." Samuel's expression had gone carefully neutral. "Miss Thornton's only just arrived, Robert. She's still learning about her inheritance." Morgan waved this away. Of course, just wanted to make my interest known early. The silver dollar is a valuable property. Prime location, established clientele. He turned back to Rebecca. "I'd be prepared to make a very generous offer, one that would allow you to return east promptly, if that's your wish." Rebecca caught the slight tension in Samuel's jaw. Clearly, there was history between these two men. "Thank you for your interest, Mr. Morgan," she said diplomatically. "As Mr. Dean said, I'm still familiarizing myself with the business. I won't be making any decisions hastily." Morgan nodded, though something in his eyes suggested disappointment. "Perfectly understandable. When you're ready to discuss possibilities, my office is just down the street. Good day to you both." As he departed, Rebecca turned questioning eyes to Samuel. "I take it you don't care for Mr. Morgan," Samuel sighed. "Robert Morgan is a shrewd businessman. He's been trying to get his hands on the silver dollar for years. Your father refused to sell, even when Morgan offered well above market value." "Why was he so interested, and why was my father opposed?" "Morgan owns most of the commercial buildings on this side of town. The silver dollar is one of the few he doesn't control. As for why your father refused," Samuel hesitated. "Morgan's businesses tend to change once he acquires them, not always for the better." "I see," Rebecca said, though she wasn't sure she fully understood the undercurrents. "Are there other potential buyers I should know about?" "Several, likely. The silver dollar is profitable and well established, but I'd ask you to consider my offer first when the time comes." Rebecca studied him. "You're very attached to this place." "It's been my home for 10 years, Samuel said simply. "More than that, it's where I found purpose. Your father believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I'd like to continue what he built." There was such sincerity in his voice that Rebecca felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she truly considered what it would mean to sell the silver dollar to someone who didn't care about its legacy or the people who worked there. "I'll consider your offer first," she promised, "but I can't guarantee anything." Samuel nodded, accepting this. "That's all I ask." As they finished their meal, Rebecca found herself watching Samuel interact with customers who stopped by their table. He knew everyone by name, asked after family members, remembered details about their lives. It was clear he was well respected in the community, just as Mrs. Peterson had said. "Would you like to see more of Silvercreek?" Samuel asked as they finished. "I could show you around town this afternoon." Rebecca hesitated. She'd planned to write letters back to Boston, informing her employers and friends of her safe arrival. But the day was pleasant, and she was curious about the town her father had called home. "I'd like that," she decided. "Let me return to the boarding house first to freshen up." "I'll meet you there in an hour," Samuel suggested, "if that suits you," as Rebecca walked back to Mrs. Peterson's. She found herself looking at Silvercreek with new eyes. The dusty streets and wooden buildings no longer seemed quite so foreign. There was life here, community, and her father had been an important part of it. For the first time since arriving, Rebecca wondered if selling the silver dollar and leaving immediately was truly the right decision. The thought surprised her and she pushed it aside. Of course she would sell. Her life was in Boston, not this frontier town. Yet Samuel's obvious devotion to the saloon and the legacy her father had created gave her pause. 1 month, she reminded herself. She would stay 1 month, learn what she needed to know, and then make her decision. But as she prepared for her tour of Silvercreek with Samuel, Rebecca couldn't quite shake the feeling that this place and its people might prove harder to leave than she had anticipated. True to his word, Samuel arrived at the boarding house precisely an hour later. Rebecca had changed into a walking dress of sage green, more practical for an afternoon tour than her more formal attire. She'd also exchanged her city boots for a sturdier pair better suited to the dusty streets. "You look lovely," Samuel said simply when she met him on the porch. "Thank you." Rebecca felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment, which she quickly attributed to the warmth of the afternoon. "Shall we?" They set off down the main street, Samuel pointing out businesses and introducing Rebecca to people they encountered. Everyone seemed to know him, greeting him with genuine warmth and showing curious interest in Rebecca. "Silvercreek's grown considerably in the past 5 years, Samuel explained as they walked. "When I first arrived, it was little more than a dusty outpost. The silver mines brought the first wave of settlers, but it's become more diverse since." Ranching, farming, some manufacturing now. It seems quite civilized for a frontier town, Rebecca observed. There were proper stores, a bank, a church under construction, even a small school. Your father was part of that transformation, Samuel told her. He served on the town council, helped recruit a proper doctor, contributed to building the school. He believed Silvercreek could be more than just another mining camp that would disappear once the silver played out. This image of her father as a community builder surprised Rebecca. In her few childhood memories and her mother's occasional comments, James Thornton had seemed restless, unable to settle. The man Samuel described was very different, someone who had put down roots and invested in a community's future. They passed a small house with a sign indicating it was the doctor's office. A man in his 30s was just emerging, medical bag in hand. "Dr. Miller," Samuel called. "Got a minute?" "There's someone you should meet." The doctor approached, his expression curious. "Samuel, what can I do for you?" "This is Miss Rebecca Thornton, James's daughter from back east." The doctor's face lit with recognition. "Miss Thornton, a pleasure to meet you. Your father spoke of you often." "You knew my father well?" Rebecca asked. "He's the reason I'm here," Dr. Miller explained. "I was fresh out of medical school in Chicago when your father wrote offering to help establish a practice in Silvercreek. Said the town needed a proper doctor, not just traveling medicine men. He guaranteed my first year's income until I could build a patient base." "That was very generous of him," Rebecca said, surprised once again by her father's community involvement. James Thornton understood that a growing town needs certain foundations: law, education, medicine. He helped ensure Silvercreek had all three. The doctor glanced at his bag. "I'd love to chat longer, but I've got a patient waiting out at the Peterson Ranch. Perhaps you'll join my wife and me for dinner one evening during your stay." "I'd like that," Rebecca replied, finding she meant it. As they continued their walk, Rebecca processed this new information about her father. He seems to have been quite involved in developing the town. Samuel nodded. He believed in this place, said he'd spent too many years drifting, wanted to build something lasting. They passed the bank, a solid brick building that stood out among the wooden structures. "The bank president, Harold Fleming, was another of your father's recruits," Samuel noted, "convinced him to leave Denver and help establish proper banking here. Before that, miners had nowhere secure to deposit their earnings. Their tour took them past the school, a neat one-room building where Miss Collins could be seen through the window, instructing a group of children of various ages. Education was particularly important to your father," Samuel said as they paused to watch. "He contributed half the funds to build the school, convinced the town council to provide the rest." Rebecca felt oddly moved by this revelation. Her own love of education and teaching suddenly seemed like a connection to the father she'd barely known. They continued to the edge of town, where Samuel pointed out various ranches in the distance and explained the local economy. Rebecca was impressed by his knowledge and the thoughtful way he answered her questions. As they turned back toward town, Samuel asked, "Would you like to see where your father is buried? The cemetery's just beyond that copse of trees." Rebecca hesitated. She hadn't considered visiting her father's grave, but suddenly felt it was important. "Yes, I would." The cemetery was small but well maintained. Samuel led her directly to a plot near a large oak tree. The headstone was simple but of good quality, the engraving clear: James Thornton, 1828-1878, beloved father, trusted friend, he built more than he took. Rebecca stood silently, reading the epitaph again. "He built more than he took," she repeated softly. Was that his philosophy? "His words," Samuel confirmed. "He said it often. Believed a man should leave more behind than he consumed in life." Rebecca felt tears unexpectedly stinging her eyes. The father she was discovering here was so different from the distant figure she remembered: a man of principles, of community spirit, someone who had clearly earned the respect of those around him. "I wish I had known him better," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel stood quietly beside her, offering silent support. After a moment he said, "He regretted not being part of your life, talked about writing to you, asking you to visit, but never did. I think he was afraid you'd refuse." I might have, Rebecca acknowledged honestly. I had complicated feelings about him leaving. He understood that, still kept track of you though, was proud of the woman you'd become. Rebecca wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her efforts. Thank you for bringing me here. As they walked back toward town, Rebecca found herself opening up about her life in Boston, her teaching, her small circle of friends, the modest apartment she'd maintained since her mother's passing. Samuel listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. In turn, he shared more about his own past. He'd grown up in Missouri, son of a farmer with a violent temper, left home at 16, worked various jobs across the West before landing in Silvercreek. His story was told matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but Rebecca sensed the hardships he'd overcome. By the time they reached the boarding house, the afternoon was fading into evening. Rebecca realized with surprise that they'd spent hours together, the conversation flowing naturally throughout. "Thank you for the tour," she said as they stopped at the gate. "I have a much better understanding of Silvercreek now." "My pleasure," Samuel replied. "Perhaps tomorrow you might want to see more of the Silver Dollar's operations. The evening crowd is quite different from lunch," Rebecca nodded. "I'd like that. I should understand all aspects of the business." "I'll come by around 7 then," Samuel suggested. As he tipped his hat and turned to leave, Rebecca found herself watching his retreating figure with mixed emotions. She'd come to Silvercreek determined to sell her inheritance and return east as quickly as possible. Yet after just 2 days, she was beginning to question that certainty. The Silver Dollar was clearly more than just a business. It was part of her father's legacy, a cornerstone of the community he'd helped build. And Samuel Dean was more than just an employee, he was the steward of that legacy, someone who understood its value beyond mere profits. Rebecca entered the boarding house, her mind whirling with new perspectives and unexpected questions. 1 month, she reminded herself. She had 1 month to make her decision, but already she sensed that decision would be far more difficult than she had anticipated. The evening at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house passed pleasantly enough. The other boarders were curious about Rebecca's day, and she found herself sharing details of her tour with Samuel and the discoveries she'd made about her father's role in the community. "James Thornton was instrumental in bringing me to Silvercreek," Miss Collins confirmed. "He corresponded with my former school in Philadelphia, convinced the town council to offer a competitive salary. He believed education was essential for the town's future." "Your father helped me secure my position at the bank as well," Mr. Porter added. "He had connections throughout the territory, used them to Silvercreek's advantage." Rebecca absorbed these additional confirmations of her father's community involvement. "I had no idea he was so civic-minded." "In my childhood memories, he was restless." Mrs. Peterson, serving apple pie for dessert, offered her perspective. "James was restless in his early years here, but something changed about 13 years ago. He seemed to make a decision to put down roots, to invest in Silvercreek's future." 12 years ago would have been shortly after her mother had refused his request to reconcile, Rebecca realized. Perhaps that had been a turning point for him. "And Samuel Dean," Rebecca asked, trying to sound casual, "how does the town view him?" The 3 other diners exchanged glances that Rebecca couldn't quite interpret. "Samuel is highly respected," Miss Collins said carefully. "He had a somewhat colorful past when he first arrived, but your father saw his potential. He's proven himself a man of integrity many times over." "He's also unmarried," Mrs. Peterson added with a small smile. "Something of interest to many young ladies in town, though he's shown little inclination in that direction." Rebecca felt a flush rising to her cheeks and quickly changed the subject. "The Silver Dollar seems unusually respectable for a saloon. Is that perception accurate?" "Entirely," Mr. Porter confirmed. "Your father created an establishment that serves the entire community. During the day, it's more restaurant than saloon. Even in the evenings, it maintains standards that other establishments don't bother with. And Samuel has continued those standards since your father's illness," Miss Collins added. "Some thought the place might change without James at the helm, but Samuel has been steadfast in honoring your father's vision." After dinner, Rebecca retired to her room and wrote long overdue letters to her employers and friends in Boston, explaining her arrival in Silvercreek and her need to remain longer than anticipated to settle her father's affairs. As she wrote, she realized she was no longer certain of her return date. The 1-month deadline she'd set for herself suddenly seemed arbitrary. The next morning, Rebecca decided to visit the Silver Dollar again, this time without Samuel's escort. She wanted to observe the operations on her own, to form impressions without his influence, however unintentional that influence might be. The lunch crowd was beginning to arrive when she entered. Martha greeted her warmly from the kitchen doorway, and Thomas offered a respectful nod as he arranged chairs. Jenny approached immediately. "Good morning, Miss Thornton. Will you be dining with us today?" "Yes, thank you, and please call me Rebecca." Jenny looked surprised but pleased. "Yes, Miss Rebecca. Would you like your father's table again?" Rebecca considered, then shook her head. "I think I'd prefer something more central today. I'd like to observe the operations if that doesn't make you uncomfortable." "Not at all. Your father did the same thing sometimes, just sat and watched how everything worked." Jenny led her to a table with a good view of both the bar and the kitchen entrance. For the next 2 hours, Rebecca observed the lunchtime business with keen interest. Martha's cooking was indeed excellent, judging by the clean plates returning to the kitchen. The servers were efficient and friendly, the atmosphere pleasant. Rebecca noted how diverse the clientele was: businessmen, families, a few women dining alone, which would be unusual in Boston. Samuel emerged from the back office around 1 o'clock, stopping short when he spotted her. He approached her table with a smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "Miss Thornton, I didn't expect to see you until this evening." "I wanted to observe the daytime operations," Rebecca explained. "You were right about the restaurant aspect being significant. Mind if I join you?" When she nodded, he took the seat across from her. "What are your impressions so far?" "The food is excellent, the service efficient, the atmosphere welcoming," Rebecca said honestly. "I can see why it's popular. Your father understood that a good meal brings people back more reliably than liquor," Samuel explained. "Drinking is irregular for most folks, but everyone eats every day." "A sound business principle," Rebecca agreed. "The diverse clientele is particularly interesting. In Boston, establishments tend to cater to specific classes or groups." James believed in creating a place where anyone would feel comfortable, provided they behaved civilly. He turned away customers who couldn't manage that, regardless of their wealth or standing. As they spoke, Rebecca noticed a well-dressed older woman enter and look around uncertainly. Samuel followed her gaze. "Mrs. Harrington," he identified her. "Widow of a mine owner, lives alone in that big house on the hill north of town, doesn't come in often." Jenny greeted the woman and led her to a table near the window. Rebecca observed how respectfully she was treated, how quickly her order was taken. "Your father made a point of ensuring women could dine here comfortably," Samuel noted. "Said half the town's money was controlled by wives and widows, and only a fool would turn away their business." Rebecca smiled at this practical approach. "He sounds like quite the businessman." He was, but it wasn't just about profit. He genuinely believed in creating a gathering place for the whole community. As the lunch crowd began to thin, Rebecca continued her observations. She noticed how Samuel interacted with staff and customers alike, firm but kind, respectful to everyone regardless of their station. She could see why her father had trusted him with increasingly more responsibility. "I should let you get back to work," Rebecca said eventually. "I'll return this evening as planned," Samuel nodded. "I look forward to it. The Silver Dollar shows a different face after dark, though still respectable." As Rebecca left, she found herself looking forward to the evening more than she cared to admit. Her interest in the saloon's operations was genuine, but she couldn't deny that Samuel Dean's company was becoming increasingly appealing as well. That thought gave her pause as she walked back to the boarding house. She had come to Silvercreek with a clear purpose: to sell her inheritance and return to Boston. Becoming attached to the silver dollar or to its part owner would only complicate matters. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she was beginning to feel to this place, to her father's legacy, and to the man who had helped build it. Back at Mrs. Peterson's, Rebecca found herself restless. With several hours before her evening at the Silver Dollar, she decided to explore more of Silvercreek on her own. The town was compact enough to navigate easily, and she wanted to see more of the place her father had called home. The Mercantile seemed a good place to start. Rebecca was curious about Robert Morgan, the man who had expressed interest in buying the Silver Dollar. The store was impressive for a frontier town, well stocked with goods ranging from basic necessities to luxury items that must have been shipped at considerable expense from back east. Morgan himself was behind the counter dealing with a customer. He spotted Rebecca immediately, his expression brightening. As soon as he'd completed the transaction, he approached her. "Miss Thornton, what a pleasant surprise. How may I assist you today?" "Just browsing, Mr. Morgan." "Your store is quite impressive." Morgan beamed with pride. "The finest between Denver and Salt Lake City, if I may say so. I believe in providing quality goods, even out here on the frontier." Rebecca wandered the aisles, noting the variety and organization. Morgan followed, pointing out items he thought might interest her. "You mentioned yesterday that you've been interested in acquiring the Silver Dollar for some time," Rebecca said casually. "May I ask why that particular business interests you?" Morgan's smile became calculating. "Direct, like your father. Very well. The Silver Dollar occupies the best commercial location in Silvercreek. The building is solid, the business established. With the right management, it could be even more profitable." "It seems quite profitable already," Rebecca observed. "Oh, it does well enough, but your father was traditional in his approach, refused to expand into areas that would have increased revenues significantly." "Such as?" Morgan hesitated. "Gaming, for one. A few tables of faro or poker would bring in substantial income, and entertainment of a more varied nature would attract a certain clientele willing to spend freely." Rebecca understood his meaning immediately. "You mean the sort of women my father refused to employ." "Business is business, Miss Thornton," Morgan said smoothly. "What was adequate for your father might not be what you wish to pursue. You're a modern woman, clearly educated. I imagine you understand that sentimentality has no place in commerce." "Perhaps," Rebecca said noncommittally. "Though there's something to be said for a business with a respected reputation." Morgan waved this away. "Reputation is well and good, but profit is what matters in the end. My offer would allow you to return east with a substantial sum, far more than Dean could ever hope to pay you." "You seem very certain I wish to sell." "A young lady of your obvious refinement can hardly be expected to remain in Silvercreek permanently, running a saloon of all things. It's simply not suitable." Rebecca bristled at his presumption but kept her expression neutral. "I haven't made any decisions yet, Mr. Morgan. I'm still learning about my inheritance." Of course, but when you're ready to discuss terms, my offer will be most generous." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And unlike some, I can pay immediately, no need for extended financing or delay." The implied criticism of Samuel's financial situation was obvious. Rebecca thanked Morgan for his time and continued her exploration of the town, her mind working through the implications of the conversation. Morgan clearly saw the Silver Dollar as an underutilized asset, one he would transform in ways her father had deliberately avoided. Rebecca's wanderings took her past the bank, the sheriff's office, and finally to the small church under construction. A man in cleric's clothing was supervising as workers installed windows in the nearly completed building. "Good afternoon," he called when he noticed Rebecca. "Welcome to Silvercreek's first proper church. Still under construction, as you can see, but we hope to hold services within a month." "It's coming along beautifully," Rebecca observed. "I'm Rebecca Thornton." The man's face lit with recognition. "James's daughter, I'm Reverend Thomas Walsh. Your father was one of our most generous contributors to this building project." "Another of his community investments," Rebecca noted. "I'm learning he was quite involved in Silvercreek's development." Indeed he was, though he'd be embarrassed to hear it described that way. James preferred to work quietly, often anonymously. The Reverend studied her. You favor him around the eyes, he would be pleased you've come. I wish I'd known him better, Rebecca admitted. Everyone here seems to have known a different man than the father I remember. People change, Miss Thornton. Your father found purpose here that perhaps eluded him in his younger years. The Reverend gestured to the church. He wasn't a regular churchgoer, but he believed in the stabilizing influence of faith on a community. Said every growing town needs certain institutions. So I'm learning, Rebecca smiled. It seems he had quite a vision for Silvercreek. He did. And he found like-minded individuals to help realize that vision. Samuel Dean chief among them. You know Samuel well as anyone, I suppose. He's a private man in many ways, but his actions speak clearly enough. He's continued your father's work these past months, both at the Silver Dollar and in the community. As Rebecca walked back to the boarding house, she reflected on the stark contrast between Morgan's purely profit-driven approach and the community-focused vision her father and Samuel had pursued. The Silver Dollar, she was beginning to understand, was more than just a business. It was part of the foundation upon which Silvercreek was building its future. That evening, Rebecca dressed with more care than she cared to admit. She chose a dress of deep blue that brought out her eyes, styled her hair more elaborately than usual, and even added a touch of color to her lips. All for propriety's sake, she told herself, as she would be appearing in public at a saloon. It had nothing to do with Samuel Dean's appreciative gaze or the way his rare smile made her pulse quicken. Samuel arrived precisely at 7 to escort her to the Silver Dollar. He too seemed to have taken extra care with his appearance. His dark hair was neatly combed, his shirt crisp, his waistcoat and jacket well fitted to his broad shoulders. You look lovely, he said simply, echoing his compliment from the previous day. Thank you, Rebecca replied, feeling that same unwelcome flush of pleasure. You're quite presentable yourself. His eyes crinkled at the corners, acknowledging her teasing tone. High praise indeed, shall we? The Silver Dollar was transformed in the evening hours. Lamps cast a warm glow over the room, tables had been rearranged to create more intimate groupings, and the bar was fully staffed. A man Rebecca hadn't met before William, she presumed was serving drinks with practiced efficiency. The clientele was predominantly male now, though Rebecca noticed several respectable-looking women accompanied by husbands or male companions. The atmosphere was lively but not rowdy, with conversation, occasional laughter, and the clink of glasses creating a pleasant background noise. Samuel led her to her father's table, which offered a good view of the entire room while remaining somewhat separate. A server, not Jenny, but another young woman, approached immediately. Evening, Mr. Dean. Miss Thornton. She nodded respectfully. What can I get for you? Coffee for me, Sarah, Samuel replied. Miss Thornton. The same, please. As Sarah departed, Samuel explained the evening operations. We serve drinks primarily now, though Martha keeps some food available for those who want it. Card games at those tables, he nodded toward the far corner, but no banking games, just friendly poker with reasonable limits. William watches for cheats or anyone getting in over their head. Rebecca observed the easy camaraderie among the patrons, the respectful tone that prevailed even as men relaxed with their drinks. It's more controlled than I expected. Your father established clear expectations. Those who couldn't abide by them found other places to drink. Samuel nodded toward a man entering through the front door. Sheriff Davis stops by most evenings, not officially but to keep an eye on things. Having good relations with the law helps maintain order. The sheriff, a weathered man in his 40s, spotted them and approached. Evening, Samuel. And you must be James's daughter, Alan Davis, County Sheriff, Rebecca Thornton, pleased to meet you. The sheriff studied her with frank curiosity. You planning to stay in Silvercreek, Miss Thornton? I'm still considering my options, Rebecca replied diplomatically. Well, your father left big boots to fill, but Samuel here's been doing a fine job of it. The sheriff glanced around the room. Place still runs smooth as clockwork. After the sheriff moved on, Rebecca turned to Samuel. He seemed to assume you're running the silver dollar permanently. Most folks do, Samuel admitted. Your father and I worked closely together for years. When he fell ill, I took over the day-to-day operations entirely. It was a natural transition. Yet you don't own a controlling interest, Rebecca pointed out. No, that's your right as his daughter. And if I sell to someone else, someone like Robert Morgan, Samuel's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, then I'd have decisions to make. Morgan would change everything your father built. I'm not sure I could be part of that. What would you do instead? I've saved enough to start something smaller. Wouldn't be the silver dollar, but it would be mine. He met her gaze directly. But I'd rather buy your share if you'll give me time to arrange it. Rebecca considered this. Mr. Morgan implied he could pay immediately while you would need financing. That's true. I don't have that kind of capital on hand, but I have good relations with the bank, a solid reputation. I could arrange terms that would be fair to both of us. Why is it so important to you to keep the silver dollar as it is? Purely from a business perspective, Morgan's approach might be more profitable. Samuel was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Your father and I built something here that matters. Not just a profitable business, but a place that serves this community in the right ways. The silver dollar under Morgan would be just another saloon liquor, gambling, women for hire. There's plenty of those already. What your father created is different, it matters. The conviction in his voice moved Rebecca more than she wanted to admit. Before she could respond, the front door opened again, and a group of cowboys entered trail-worn, dusty, clearly ready for relaxation after long days in the saddle. William greeted them from behind the bar, serving drinks efficiently. The men were boisterous but not disruptive, finding seats at a large table near the center of the room. Reynolds' outfit, Samuel explained. Ranch hands from the Big R, about 20 miles east. Good men work hard. Come to town every month or so when they get paid. Rebecca watched as the cowboys settled in, ordering drinks and food. One of them glanced in their direction, then did a double take when he spotted Rebecca. He said something to his companions, who all turned to look. Rebecca felt uncomfortable under their collective gaze. Samuel noticed immediately. Don't worry, they're just surprised to see a new face, especially one as lovely as yours. They'll mind their manners. As if to prove his point, the cowboys quickly returned to their own conversations, though Rebecca caught occasional glances in their direction. The evening progressed pleasantly. Samuel pointed out various regular customers, explaining their backgrounds and connections to the community. Rebecca was impressed by his knowledge of the town and its people. He seemed to know everyone, their histories, their families. Around 9 o'clock, a man entered carrying a fiddle case. He nodded to Samuel, then made his way to the small stage in the corner. Entertainment, Rebecca asked. Saturday night tradition, Samuel confirmed. Jack Fletcher plays for drinks and whatever folks put in his hat. Your father hired him regularly, said every decent saloon needs music on a Saturday night. Fletcher tuned his fiddle briefly, then launched into a lively tune that had several patrons tapping their feet. After a few instrumental pieces, he began playing familiar songs that some customers sang along with. Would you care to dance? Samuel asked suddenly. Rebecca looked around in surprise. Here, now, why not? It's a respectable establishment. His eyes held a hint of challenge and something else, warmth perhaps, or invitation. Several other couples had already moved to the small open area near the stage. Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. All right. Samuel led her to the floor, placing one hand respectfully at her waist, taking her hand with the other. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, guiding her skillfully through the simple dance. You dance well, Mr. Dean, Rebecca observed, slightly breathless from more than just the movement. Samuel, he reminded her, and thank you. Your father insisted I learn, said a man should know how to dance properly. He taught you, Samuel laughed, the sound rich and warm. Lord, no. Paid for lessons from a traveling dance instructor. Said my frontier shuffling was an embarrassment to the establishment. Rebecca smiled at the image. He sounds quite determined. He was. When James Thornton decided something needed doing, it got done. Samuel's gaze held hers. You have that same quality, I think. Do I? Yes, determination, purpose, you know your own mind. The music slowed and their steps adjusted accordingly. Rebecca was acutely aware of Samuel's hand at her waist, the subtle scent of soap and leather that seemed to surround him, the warmth in his blue eyes as they moved together. I'm not as certain as I was when I arrived, she admitted quietly. About what? About selling immediately. About returning to Boston without considering alternatives. Something flickered in Samuel's expression. Hope, perhaps. What's changed? I'm seeing Silvercreek differently. The silver dollar, my father's legacy. She hesitated. The music ended before Samuel could respond. They stood for a moment, still close, until applause for the musician broke the spell. Samuel led her back to their table, his expression thoughtful. Rebecca, he began, using her given name for the first time. I don't want to influence your decision unfairly. Your life is in Boston. You have every right to sell your inheritance and return to it. But, she prompted, sensing more to his statement, but I believe you could find a place here if you wanted it, not just at the Silver Dollar but in Silvercreek, the town your father helped build. Before Rebecca could respond, a commotion at the bar drew their attention. One of the cowboys, younger than the others, with a belligerent set to his jaw, was arguing loudly with William. Said, I've had enough. Who the hell are you to tell me when I've had enough? The young man demanded, his words slightly slurred. Samuel was on his feet immediately, moving toward the bar with purposeful strides. Rebecca followed, curious to see how he would handle the situation. Problem, William? Samuel asked calmly. Young mister. Harris here thinks I'm being unreasonable in suggesting he's reached his limit, William explained. Told him he could switch to coffee if he wants to keep his seat. The cowboy Harris turned his glare on Samuel. Don't need no nursemaid tellin' me when to stop drinkin'. House rules, Samuel said, his voice level but firm. When William says you've reached your limit, you have. Coffee, food, or a room at the hotel to sleep it off, those are your options. Harris puffed up his chest. And if I don't like those options? Then you can leave peacefully and find another establishment more to your liking. Samuel's tone remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. One of the older cowboys approached, laying a hand on Harris's shoulder. Come on, Robbie, no need for trouble. The man's just doing his job. Harris shrugged off the hand. Ain't right, my money's good as anyone's. It is, Samuel agreed, and we'll be happy to serve you again tomorrow when you're sober. Tonight you've had enough. The standoff continued for a tense moment. Rebecca held her breath, wondering if the situation would escalate. Then Harris's shoulders slumped slightly. Fine. Gimme coffee then, he glared at Samuel. Still ain't right. Samuel nodded to William, who poured a cup of coffee and set it before Harris. The young cowboy took it sullenly, but made no further protest. The older cowboy clapped him on the shoulder. Smart decision, boy. James Thornton didn't tolerate foolishness in his place, and neither does Dean here. As Samuel returned to their table, Rebecca observed how smoothly he had diffused the situation, firm but not aggressive, offering alternatives rather than simple refusal. Does that happen often? She asked when he rejoined her. Occasionally. Young men like Harris think being told they've had enough is an insult to their manhood. Usually their more experienced friends keep them in line. Samuel shrugged. It's part of running a saloon. The key is addressing problems before they become serious. You handled it well. Your father taught me that too, said using your fists is the last resort of a man with no better ideas. Samuel smiled slightly. Took me a while to learn that lesson. I was quick-tempered in my younger days. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Rebecca found herself genuinely enjoying the atmosphere, the music, and especially Samuel's company. By the time he escorted her back to the boarding house, it was nearly midnight. They paused at the gate, reluctant to part. The night was clear, stars brilliant above them in a way Rebecca had never seen in Boston. Thank you for this evening, she said. It was educational, Samuel smiled. Just educational, enjoyable as well, Rebecca admitted. I'm beginning to understand why my father valued the silver dollar beyond its profits. It's a special place, Samuel agreed, like Silvercreek itself, growing, changing, but holding on to what matters. Rebecca looked up at him, his face half shadowed in the moonlight. I have much to consider before making any decisions. Take all the time you need, Samuel said softly. I'm not going anywhere. The weight of his words hung between them, filled with meaning beyond their surface simplicity. Rebecca felt the pull between them, saw it reflected in Samuel's eyes. Good night, Samuel, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Good night, Rebecca. As she entered the boarding house, Rebecca knew her carefully planned departure from Silvercreek had become far more complicated than she had anticipated. The silver dollar, her father's legacy, and most unexpectedly, Samuel Dean had all worked their way into her considerations in ways she couldn't have predicted. 1 month, she had promised herself. But as she prepared for bed, Rebecca wondered if even a month would be enough time to untangle the unexpected feelings taking root in her heart. The following weeks passed in a blur of discovery for Rebecca. Each day brought new revelations about her father, the silver dollar, and the community of Silvercreek. She spent most mornings at the saloon, learning the business operations from Samuel and getting to know the staff better. Afternoons were often devoted to exploring the town or reviewing the saloon's books, while evenings found her back at the Silver Dollar, observing the night business and increasingly enjoying Samuel's company. Martha Weber, the cook, became a particular ally. The older woman shared stories of the early days when the Silver Dollar was just getting established and Silvercreek was still rough around the edges. Your father had a vision, Martha told her one morning as they shared coffee in the kitchen before opening. Most men coming west were looking to take silver from the mines, take land for ranching, take whatever they could. James wanted to build something that would last beyond the boom times. He certainly seems to have succeeded, Rebecca observed. The Silver Dollar is clearly a cornerstone of the community, Martha nodded, and Samuel's been carrying on that tradition. Some thought the place would change after your father took ill, but Samuel never wavered from James's principles. They were close. Like father and son, especially these last few years. Martha studied Rebecca with shrewd eyes. Samuel hasn't had many people believe in him the way your father did, changed him. When he first came to town, he was angry at the world, quick with his fists. James saw beyond that, recognized something worth cultivating. Rebecca thought about this as she helped Martha prepare for the lunch service, a task she had taken up voluntarily, finding satisfaction in the practical work. Samuel's transformation from angry young man to respected business manager spoke volumes about her father's judgment of character. The Silver Dollar staff had initially been wary of Rebecca, uncertain of her intentions for the business that provided their livelihoods. But as the days passed, and she showed genuine interest in learning every aspect of the operation, they began to warm to her. Jenny and the other servers included her in their conversations during quiet periods. Thomas sought her opinion on minor repairs and improvements. Even William, the taciturn bartender, gradually became more communicative. Samuel watched this integration with quiet approval. One afternoon, as they reviewed the books together in the office, he commented on it. The staff have taken to you, he observed. They were concerned at first that you'd sell to Morgan and they'd lose their positions. Is that what would happen? Rebecca asked. Samuel nodded grimly. Morgan would keep some perhaps, but he'd bring in his own people for the more specialized services he plans to offer. And he wouldn't maintain your father's policy of fair wages and respectful treatment. I've noticed how well everyone works together here, Rebecca said. There's a sense of family, almost. Your father created that atmosphere deliberately, said people work better when they feel valued. Samuel smiled. It's good business, but it's also the right way to treat folks. As the days passed, Rebecca found herself increasingly torn about her future plans. Her life in Boston seemed increasingly distant, while her connections to Silvercreek grew stronger. She wrote regularly to her employers and friends back east, but found herself less eager for replies, less certain of her desire to return. Her growing feelings for Samuel complicated matters further. They spent hours together daily, discussing the business, but also sharing personal stories, hopes, and perspectives. His intelligence, integrity, and quiet strength appealed to her in ways no Boston gentleman ever had. When their hands occasionally brushed while reviewing ledgers, or when his blue eyes held hers during conversation, Rebecca felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the western sunshine. Yet she hesitated to acknowledge these feelings, even to herself. Any attachment to Samuel would only make her eventual decision more difficult. And despite her growing connection to Silvercreek, Rebecca wasn't certain she belonged in this frontier town, so different from the civilized Eastern world she knew. 3 weeks after her arrival, Rebecca received a letter from the music school in Boston where she taught. They expressed understanding of her situation, but gently reminded her that they would need to hire a replacement if she didn't return for the autumn term beginning in late September. They requested a definitive answer within 2 weeks. The letter forced Rebecca to confront the decision she'd been avoiding: stay in Silvercreek or return to Boston. Keep the silver dollar or sell it. Follow her growing feelings for Samuel, or return to the predictable but solitary life she'd built for herself back east. That evening, she sat alone at her father's table in the Silver Dollar, the letter folded in her reticule, her thoughts in turmoil. Samuel approached, concern evident in his expression. "Everything all right? You've been quiet tonight," Rebecca gestured to the chair across from her. "I received a letter from the music school. They need to know within 2 weeks whether I'm returning for the autumn term." Samuel sat, his expression carefully neutral. "I see. Have you decided?" "No," Rebecca admitted. "I came to Silvercreek so certain of my course: sell the silver dollar, return to Boston, continue teaching. Now," she trailed off, uncertain how to express her conflicted feelings. "Now." Samuel prompted gently. "Now I'm not sure what I want. I've come to care about this place, about the people here, about my father's legacy." She met his gaze directly. "About you." The admission hung between them, more significant than the simple words might suggest. Samuel's eyes softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "Rebecca," he began, then stopped as the saloon door opened and Robert Morgan entered. The merchant spotted them immediately and approached, his smile calculated. "Miss Thornton, Mr. Dean, good evening to you both." Samuel withdrew his hand reluctantly, his expression cooling. "Morgan, what brings you to the Silver Dollar? You're not a regular customer. Business, I'm afraid." Morgan turned to Rebecca. "Miss Thornton, I wondered if you'd had an opportunity to consider my interest in purchasing your establishment." Rebecca straightened in her chair. "I'm still evaluating my options, Mr. Morgan." Of course, but time marches on and opportunities may not wait indefinitely." Morgan glanced around the saloon with assessing eyes. "I've recently acquired the Frontier Saloon on the edge of town, a modest establishment now but with potential for expansion." "Congratulations," Samuel said flatly. "The Frontier has been struggling for years." Morgan smiled thinly. "Precisely why it was available at an attractive price. With proper management and the right amenities, it will thrive. Of course, the Silver Dollar would be a more prestigious acquisition, given its central location and established clientele." Rebecca understood the implied pressure. "Are you suggesting your interest in the Silver Dollar might not remain open indefinitely? Business opportunities evolve, Miss Thornton. My offer remains generous for now, but as I invest in my new acquisition, capital becomes allocated elsewhere." Morgan adjusted his cuffs. "I simply thought you should be aware that decisions delayed are sometimes decisions made by default." The transparent attempt at manipulation hardened Rebecca's resolve. "Thank you for the information, Mr. Morgan. I'll keep it in mind. However, I won't be rushed into a decision of this magnitude." Morgan's smile tightened. "As you wish, my offer remains open for now. Good evening to you both." As he departed, Samuel's expression darkened. "He's trying to pressure you?" "Obviously," Rebecca agreed. "Though his acquisition of the Frontier is interesting timing, he's hedging his bets. If he can't get the Silver Dollar, he'll try to compete with it." Samuel shook his head. "The Frontier's never been more than a rough drinking establishment. If he's planning to expand amenities, I can guess what direction he'll take it." Rebecca considered this. Would that affect the silver dollar's business? Some, perhaps. There will always be men seeking that sort of entertainment, but your father built a different kind of establishment, one that serves the whole community. Samuel met her gaze directly. It's worth preserving, Rebecca. Whether I own it, or you do, or we run it together. The implication of his words, the possibility of a future together, hung in the air between them. Before Rebecca could respond, William called Samuel to the bar to handle a delivery issue. The moment passed, but his words remained with Rebecca long after she returned to the boarding house that night. The next morning, Rebecca woke with a sense of purpose. Morgan's pressure tactics had clarified something for her. She would not be rushed or manipulated into selling the silver dollar, regardless of her ultimate decision about staying in Silvercreek. After breakfast, she visited Mr. Winters, her father's attorney, to discuss her options more thoroughly. The elderly lawyer welcomed her into his office with evident pleasure. "Miss Thornton, I've been hoping you'd stop by. How are you finding Silvercreek after nearly a month with us?" "Surprisingly appealing," Rebecca admitted. "I've come to understand why my father valued this community." "He found his purpose here," Winters nodded. "Something that eluded him in his younger years, I believe, and the community valued him in return." He gestured to a chair. "What can I help you with today?" Rebecca seated herself, arranging her thoughts. "I need to understand all my options regarding the silver dollar. When I arrived, I was certain I would sell quickly and return east. Now I'm less certain." Winters leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You have several options, legally speaking. You could sell your 80% share, either to Samuel Dean or another buyer like Robert Morgan. You could retain ownership but hire management to run the business in your absence, though finding someone with Samuel's integrity and experience would be challenging. Or you could stay and run it yourself, with or without Samuel's continued involvement. And if I were to sell to Samuel specifically, what would that entail given his limited capital? He would need financing, certainly. The bank would likely provide a portion, given his excellent reputation, but he would still need to arrange terms with you for the balance, perhaps a down payment with installments over time." Winters studied her. "May I speak frankly, Miss Thornton?" "Please do." "Your father hoped you would keep the silver dollar, or at least sell it to Samuel rather than an outside buyer. He knew you had your own life in Boston, but he believed you might find Silvercreek appealing if you gave it a chance." Winters smiled slightly. "He also thought quite highly of Samuel's character and believed you might as well, given the opportunity to know him." Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "Are you suggesting my father hoped for a personal connection between us?" James was a romantic at heart, despite his practical exterior. "He never spoke of it directly, but I believe he hoped you might find happiness here, perhaps with Samuel, continuing the legacy he built." Winters spread his hands. "But he was also realistic. He left you the majority share to do with as you pleased, without restrictions. The decision is entirely yours." Rebecca left the attorney's office with much to consider. The idea that her father had hoped she might find a place in Silvercreek, possibly alongside Samuel, was both touching and unsettling. Had he seen something in both of them that suggested compatibility? Or was it merely an old man's fancy, hoping to connect the two people he cared about most? She walked toward the silver dollar, her thoughts whirling. The morning was beautiful, the mountains visible in the distance, the town bustling with activity. Rebecca realized with some surprise that she had come to appreciate Silvercreek's energy, its sense of possibility and growth. Boston, with its established traditions and rigid social structures, suddenly seemed stifling by comparison. As she approached the saloon, Rebecca saw Samuel outside speaking with a delivery man. He looked up at her approach, his face brightening. Something warm unfurled in her chest at his evident pleasure in seeing her. "Good morning," he greeted her. "You're earlier than usual." "I had an appointment with Mr. Winters," Rebecca explained. "I wanted to understand my options more clearly." Samuel nodded, his expression turning serious. "And did you find clarity?" "Some," Rebecca said, "though I still have much to consider." They entered the saloon together, making their way to the office. Inside, Samuel closed the door and turned to her, his blue eyes intent. "Rebecca, I need to say something, and I hope you'll hear me out." At her nod, he continued, "I want to buy your share of the silver dollar." "You know that already, but more than that, He hesitated, then continued with determination. "I hope you'll consider staying in Silvercreek, not just for the business, but because I believe you could find happiness here." "Samuel," he held up a hand, "please let me finish. I understand you have a life in Boston, responsibilities, connections. I'm not asking you to abandon those lightly. But I've seen how you've taken to the silver dollar, how you've connected with the staff, how you've begun to understand what your father built here. And I've felt something growing between us that I can't ignore." Rebecca's heart pounded in her chest. "What are you saying exactly?" Samuel took a step closer. "I'm saying that I care for you, Rebecca, more than I expected to, more than might be wise given the circumstances. And I believe you feel something too." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. It was unlike the careful courtship rituals of Boston, but it suited him, honest, straightforward, genuine. "I do feel something," Rebecca admitted softly. "But I don't know if it's enough to change the course of my life." "I'm not asking for an answer today," Samuel said. "Only that you consider all possibilities before making your decision, including a future here, including us." Before Rebecca could respond, there was a sharp knock at the office door. Samuel stepped back, his expression shifting from intensity to professional calm. "Come in." Martha opened the door, her face apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation you should handle, Samuel. That drummer who was here last week is back, causing a fuss about his bill." Samuel nodded. "I'll be right there." He turned back to Rebecca. "Think about what I said, please." "I will," she promised. As Samuel left to handle the situation, Rebecca sank into a chair, her emotions in turmoil. Samuel's feelings mirrored her own growing attachment, but was it enough to build a future on? Could she really abandon her secure, if somewhat solitary, life in Boston for the uncertainties of Silvercreek? Could she see herself as part owner of a saloon, working alongside Samuel, building on her father's legacy? The questions had no easy answers. Yet as Rebecca sat in her father's office, surrounded by the business he had built, she felt a sense of connection she had never expected to find in this distant western town. And when she thought of Samuel, his integrity, his strength, the warmth in his blue eyes when he looked at her, she felt possibilities opening before her that both frightened and exhilarated her. The decision still loomed, but for the first time, Rebecca allowed herself to truly consider a future in Silvercreek, a future that included the silver dollar and the man who had helped her father build it into something special. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Rebecca threw herself into learning every aspect of the silver dollar's operations, from the purchasing of supplies to the scheduling of staff. She spent time with each employee, understanding their roles and backgrounds, appreciating the efficient system her father and Samuel had created. Samuel gave her space to process their conversation, maintaining a professional demeanor during business hours while finding small ways to show his regard, having fresh flowers placed on her usual table, ensuring her favorite foods were available when she dined at the saloon, introducing her to respected community members who further illuminated her father's role in Silvercreek's development. 4 days after their conversation in the office, Rebecca arrived at the Silver Dollar to find Samuel dealing with an unexpected crisis. A water pipe had burst in the kitchen, flooding the floor and threatening to damage the storage room beyond. "Martha's beside herself," Samuel explained as Rebecca entered through the front door. "We've had to close for lunch service while we get this repaired." Rebecca immediately rolled up her sleeves. "How can I help?" Samuel looked surprised but pleased by her practical response. "Thomas and I are trying to stem the leak. If you could help Martha salvage the food supplies before they're damaged, that would be tremendous." For the next 2 hours, Rebecca worked alongside the staff, moving supplies to safety, mopping floors, and eventually helping the hastily summoned plumber access the damaged pipe. Her fine dress was soaked and likely ruined, her hair fell from its careful arrangement, but she worked without complaint. Focused on solving the problem at hand, by mid-afternoon, the crisis was resolved. The pipe was repaired, the floors dried, and Martha determined they could open for limited dinner service that evening. As the staff dispersed to prepare, Samuel found Rebecca in the kitchen, helping Martha reorganize the salvaged supplies. "You're a wonder," he said simply. "Most women of your background would have retreated at the first sign of trouble." Rebecca smiled, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I'm learning that practical problems require practical solutions. Besides, everyone worked together beautifully. It was gratifying." Martha nodded approvingly. Miss Rebecca's got her father's head for crisis. James never panicked, just assessed and acted. The older woman patted Rebecca's hand. "You've got flour on your cheek, dear." As Martha bustled away, Samuel stepped closer, gently wiping the flour from Rebecca's face with his thumb. The casual intimacy of the gesture made her breath catch. "Thank you for today," he said softly. "It means a lot to see you care about this place." "I do care," Rebecca admitted. "More than I expected to." Their eyes held for a long moment, the attraction between them palpable. Then voices from the main room broke the spell, and Samuel stepped back with evident reluctance. "You should probably change before dinner service," he suggested, glancing at her damp, flower-streaked dress. "I can walk you back to Mrs. Peterson's." As they walked through town, Rebecca was acutely aware of Samuel beside her, his presence both comforting and exhilarating. The crisis had clarified something for her. She had responded to the silver dollars problem instinctively, as if protecting something that belonged to her, something she valued. "You handled that situation like you've been running a saloon for years," Samuel observed as they neared the boarding house. "Natural leadership." "Hardly," Rebecca laughed. "I just did what needed doing." "That's leadership," Samuel insisted. "Seeing what needs to be done and doing it, regardless of inconvenience." He gestured to her ruined dress. "Most ladies of your standing would have observed from a safe distance, offering suggestions at most." "Perhaps I'm not most ladies," Rebecca replied with a small smile. Samuel's eyes warmed. "No, you certainly aren't." That evening, wearing one of her simpler dresses, Rebecca returned to the Silver Dollar for the limited dinner service. The staff greeted her with new warmth, their shared crisis having broken down remaining barriers. Even William, normally reserved, offered her a cup of his special coffee blend with a rare smile. As the days passed, Rebecca found herself increasingly integrated into the Silver Dollar's operations and Silvercreek's community. She attended church services in the newly completed building, joined the town's small literary society at Miss Collins' invitation, and even began offering piano lessons to a few children whose parents were eager for cultural education. Her deadline for responding to the music school in Boston loomed ever closer, forcing Rebecca to confront her decision. One evening, a week after the water pipe crisis, she sat alone in her room at the boarding house, 2 letters before her, one to the music school declining to return for the autumn term, the other accepting their position and explaining her delayed return. A knock at her door interrupted her contemplation. Mrs. Peterson stood outside, a concerned expression on her normally cheerful face. "Miss Rebecca, Samuel Dean is downstairs asking to see you, says it's urgent." Alarmed, Rebecca followed Mrs. Peterson downstairs. Samuel stood in the entry hall, his expression grave. "What is it? Has something happened at the Silver Dollar?" "Not exactly," Samuel replied. "It's Robert Morgan. He's making a move I think you should know about immediately, Mrs." Peterson discreetly withdrew to the kitchen, leaving them alone in the entry hall. "What's happened?" Rebecca asked. "Morgan's been approaching our regular customers, offering special incentives to patronize his newly renovated Frontier Saloon instead of the Silver Dollar." Samuel's jaw tightened. "He's specifically targeting our most profitable customers, offering gambling credit, free drinks, and other entertainment not available at the Silver Dollar." "Can he do that?" "It's not illegal, just underhanded." "He's also been spreading rumors that the Silver Dollar will be changing hands soon, suggesting service might decline during the transition." Samuel met her gaze directly. "He's trying to damage the business before you make your decision, Rebecca. If he can reduce the Silver Dollar's profitability, he can argue for a lower purchase price." Rebecca felt anger rising within her. That's despicable. It's business, according to Morgan's standards. Samuel ran a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. We're already seeing an impact. Tonight's crowd was noticeably smaller than usual for a Friday, Rebecca thought quickly. We need to counter this. Let the community know the silver dollar isn't changing, that we're committed to maintaining my father's standards. Samuel's expression brightened at her use of we rather than you, but he remained focused on the problem. Exactly, but how? Morgan spreading his message personally, customer by customer. An idea formed in Rebecca's mind. Music, she said suddenly. Music? Yes, tomorrow is Saturday. You said yourself the silver dollar always has music on Saturday nights. What if we expanded that, made it a special event, something to draw people in and demonstrate our commitment to the community? Samuel considered this. What did you have in mind? A musical evening. Not just the usual fiddle player, but something more elaborate. I could play the piano. Perhaps there are other musicians in town who would participate. We could make it a celebration of Silvercreek's culture, charge no admission, offer special food from Martha's kitchen. A community gathering, Samuel nodded, warming to the idea. Your father would have loved that approach, using what makes the silver dollar special to counter Morgan's tactics. Can we organize it by tomorrow night? If we start now, Samuel confirmed. I know several people with musical talent who might participate with a little persuasion. Rebecca made a sudden decision. Give me a moment. She hurried upstairs, returning with the 2 letters she'd been contemplating. Without hesitation, she tore the one accepting the Boston position into pieces. I'm staying, she said firmly, at least for now. The silver dollar deserves someone who will fight for it, and so do the people who depend on it. The joy that bloomed on Samuel's face was worth any uncertainty she might feel. Rebecca, are you sure? About staying to fight for the silver dollar? Yes, about everything else. I'm still finding my way, but I know I can't walk away, not when Morgan is trying to destroy what my father built. Samuel took her hands in his grip warm and strong. That's all I can ask for now. We'll face Morgan together, and whatever comes after, we'll face that too. The next day was a flurry of activity. Rebecca and Samuel spread word throughout town about the special musical evening at the Silver Dollar. Martha planned an expanded menu of finger foods that could be served during performances. Thomas and William rearranged the main room to create a better performance space, moving the piano to a more prominent position. By mid-afternoon, Rebecca had recruited several additional musicians, a young man who played guitar, a woman with a beautiful singing voice, and even the bank clerk, Mr. Porter, who apparently played the flute quite well. The schoolteacher, Miss Collins, offered to recite poetry between musical performances. As evening approached, Rebecca sat at the piano, practicing pieces she hadn't performed publicly in years. She felt nervous but exhilarated, committed to defending the silver dollar against Morgan's underhanded tactics. Samuel found her there, his expression appreciative as he listened to her play. You're very talented, he said when she finished a particularly complex piece. Thank you, Rebecca smiled. Music has always been my refuge. My mother insisted on lessons from childhood. Your father mentioned that, said you had your mother's gift. Samuel sat beside her on the piano bench. Are you nervous about tonight? A little, she admitted. It's been some time since I performed publicly, but it feels right, somehow, using music to defend the silver dollar. Samuel nodded. Your father would be proud of you, Rebecca, not just for your music, but for standing up for what he built. Their eyes met, and Rebecca felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. On impulse, she leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Samuel's cheek. Thank you for believing in me. Samuel's eyes darkened with emotion. His hand came up to cup her face gently, and for a moment, Rebecca thought he might kiss her properly. Then voices from the kitchen broke the moment, and they moved apart, both slightly flushed. I should finish preparing, Rebecca said, her voice not quite steady. And I should check that William has enough stock for tonight, Samuel agreed, standing reluctantly. By 7 o'clock, the silver dollar was transformed. Lamps cast a warm glow over the room, tables were arranged to provide clear views of the performance area, and small vases of wildflowers added a festive touch. Martha's special refreshments were arranged on the bar, available throughout the evening. To Rebecca's delight and relief, the saloon began filling early. Regular customers arrived first, followed by many who rarely visited the Silver Dollar families with older children, elderly couples, even Reverend Walsh and several church members who normally avoided saloons entirely. Samuel moved through the crowd, greeting everyone personally, explaining the evening's entertainment. Rebecca, seated at the piano, watched him with admiration. His easy charm and genuine warmth drew people in, making everyone feel welcome. At precisely 8 o'clock, Samuel stepped into the performance area. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Silver Dollars Community Music Night. We're honored by your presence and excited to share an evening of entertainment with you." He gestured to Rebecca. "I'm particularly pleased to introduce Miss Rebecca Thornton, daughter of our founder James Thornton, who has graciously agreed to begin our program with several piano selections." The crowd applauded warmly as Rebecca began to play. She started with a classical piece, her fingers finding the familiar patterns despite her nervousness. As she played, she felt a connection to the audience, to the room, to her father's legacy. The music flowed through her, and she added her own interpretations to the familiar composition, infusing it with emotion. When she finished, the applause was enthusiastic. Rebecca followed with 2 more pieces, each receiving appreciative responses. As she yielded the performance area to the next musician, she caught Samuel's eye. His expression of pride and admiration warmed her more than the applause. The evening progressed beautifully. Each performer brought something unique to the program, from Mr. Porter's surprisingly accomplished flute playing to Miss Collins' dramatic poetry recitations. The regular fiddle player, Jack Fletcher, brought the house down with lively dance tunes that had several couples taking to the small open area beside the stage. During a brief intermission, Rebecca stood near the bar, accepting compliments on her playing when she noticed Robert Morgan enter the saloon. He paused just inside the door, surveying the packed room with evident displeasure. Samuel materialized at Rebecca's side, having also spotted Morgan. "Looks like our competitor has come to assess the competition," he murmured. Morgan made his way through the crowd toward them, his smile tight. "Quite a gathering, Miss Thornton. I wasn't aware the Silver Dollar had become a concert hall." "We're celebrating Silvercreek's community spirit," Rebecca replied evenly. "Something my father valued highly." "Indeed," Morgan's gaze swept the room again. "A charming diversion, though hardly sustainable as a business model, I would think." "The Silver Dollar has always been more than just a business," Samuel countered. "It's a gathering place for the whole community, offering what people need, sometimes food and drink, sometimes entertainment, always respect." Morgan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Admirable sentiments. Though I wonder if they'll translate to continued profitability as Silvercreek grows. The frontier's more progressive offerings are proving quite popular." "I'm sure they are with a certain clientele," Rebecca said, her voice cool. "The Silver Dollar serves a different purpose in this community, Mr. Morgan, one that will continue under current management." Morgan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you suggesting you've decided to remain in Silvercreek, Miss Thornton, to run a saloon yourself?" "I'm suggesting that the Silver Dollar will continue to operate according to my father's principles," Rebecca replied, deliberately vague. "Whether under my direct management or Mr. Dean's, those standards will be maintained." The implied unity between her and Samuel was not lost on Morgan. His expression hardened momentarily before he masked it with another tight smile. "I see. Well, I wish you both luck with your community gatherings. If you'll excuse me, I have my own establishment to attend to." As Morgan departed, Samuel turned to Rebecca with admiration. "You handled him perfectly." "I simply stated the truth," Rebecca replied. "The Silver Dollar will continue to operate according to my father's principles. I'm just not entirely certain yet what role I'll play in that future." Samuel's expression grew serious. "Whatever you decide, Rebecca, I want you to know I'll respect it. If you choose to return to Boston and sell your share to me, I'll honor your father's legacy." If you choose to stay and manage it yourself, I'll step aside gracefully, and if you choose to stay and work together." He hesitated. "That would be my preference, but I understand if it's not yours." Before Rebecca could respond, the intermission ended, and they were called back to their duties, Samuel managing the refreshments, Rebecca preparing for her second performance of the evening. But his words stayed with her, the sincerity in his blue eyes, the respect he offered regardless of her decision. The remainder of the evening was a tremendous success. By closing time, the Silver Dollar had hosted nearly every prominent citizen of Silvercreek, all of whom departed with warm words for Rebecca and Samuel. The message had been sent clearly throughout the community. The Silver Dollar remained a cornerstone of Silvercreek, committed to the standards James Thornton had established. As the last guests departed and the staff began cleaning up, Samuel found Rebecca at the piano, softly playing a gentle melody. "That was remarkable," he said, sitting beside her on the bench. "Your idea was inspired." Rebecca smiled, continuing to play softly. "It felt right somehow." Using music to bring people together, to remind them what the Silver Dollar means to this community. "You were magnificent," Samuel said quietly. "Not just your playing, though that was beautiful. The way you connected with everyone, made them feel welcome," stood up to Morgan. "You're a natural leader, Rebecca, like your father." Rebecca's fingers stilled on the keys. "I've been thinking about him all evening, wondering what he would think of all this." "He'd be proud," Samuel said with certainty. "Proud of how you've defended what he built, how you've connected with the community he valued." "I think I understand him better now," Rebecca admitted. "Why he stayed here, what he found in Silvercreek. There's something special about this place, isn't there? A sense of possibility, of building something meaningful." "That's exactly what drew him here," Samuel nodded. "And what kept me here too, the chance to be part of something growing, something good." Rebecca turned slightly on the bench to face him more directly. "I've made some decisions, Samuel." "Not all of them, but some." His expression grew serious. "I'm listening. I'm not returning to Boston for the autumn term. I've written to the music school declining the position." She took a deep breath. "I can't leave the Silver Dollar vulnerable to Morgan's tactics. And I can't walk away from what my father built without giving it a fair chance." Joy bloomed in Samuel's eyes, though he kept his voice measured. "I'm glad to hear that. How long do you plan to stay?" "At least through the winter," Rebecca decided. "Long enough to truly understand the business, to see if Silvercreek could be home for me." She hesitated, then added softly, "Long enough to explore other possibilities as well." Samuel's gaze intensified, understanding her meaning. "And the Silver Dollar, will you continue to manage it yourself?" "With your help," Rebecca clarified. "If you're willing to continue our partnership, you know the business far better than I do, and the staff respects you. I think we make a good team." "The best," Samuel agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "Rebecca," she placed her fingers gently against his lips, stopping his words. "I'm not ready for declarations, Samuel. I care for you more than I expected to, but I need time to be certain of my path. Can you give me that?" Samuel captured her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm that sent warmth spiraling through her. "I can wait," he said simply, "for as long as you need." The promise in his eyes, the strength and patience in his voice reassured Rebecca that she was making the right choice. The path ahead wasn't clear yet, but for the first time since arriving in Silvercreek, she was embracing the uncertainty rather than fighting it. As autumn progressed into winter, Rebecca found herself increasingly at home in Silvercreek. The Silver Dollar thrived under their joint management, successfully countering Morgan's attempts to draw away business. Rebecca's musical evening had become a monthly event, drawing crowds from throughout the county and establishing the saloon as a cultural center as well as a social one. Her relationship with Samuel deepened gradually, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They worked seamlessly together during the day and increasingly spent evenings in conversation, sharing stories and dreams. Though propriety limited their physical expressions of affection to occasional hand-holding or brief touches, the connection between them grew stronger with each passing day. By early December, with snow blanketing the mountains surrounding Silvercreek, Rebecca had made her final decision. The Silver Dollar's Christmas preparations were underway, with greenery adorning the bar and small gifts prepared for regular customers. The saloon was quiet in the afternoon lull when Rebecca found Samuel in the office, reviewing accounts. "You have a moment?" she asked from the doorway. Samuel looked up, his face brightening at the sight of her. "For you, always." Rebecca entered, closing the door behind her. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I've been thinking about the future, about Silvercreek, the Silver Dollar, and us." Samuel set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "And what have you decided?" "I'm staying," Rebecca said simply. "Permanently. Silvercreek is my home now. The Silver Dollar is where I belong." The joy that spread across Samuel's face was everything she had hoped for. He stood, moving around the desk to stand before her, taking her hands in his. "And us?" he asked softly. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "That's the most important part of my decision. I love you, Samuel. I want a future with you if you still want that too." Instead of answering with words, Samuel drew her gently into his arms and kissed her. It was a kiss of promise, of tenderness, of love long restrained but now freely expressed. Rebecca returned it wholeheartedly, her arms sliding around his neck, her heart finally at peace with her decision. When they parted, Samuel kept her close in the circle of his arms. "I've loved you since the first week you were here," he admitted. "Watching you discover your father's legacy, seeing you connect with this community, observing your courage and determination. You're everything I never knew I needed, Rebecca. And you're everything I never thought to find in Silvercreek," she replied softly. "My father knew what he was doing, didn't he, bringing us together this way?" Samuel smiled. "James was a wise man. He saw possibilities others missed, including the possibility that his Eastern daughter might fall in love with a Western saloon keeper. Especially that," Samuel laughed. "He told me once that the right person changes everything, your plans, your priorities, your sense of home. He was right." Rebecca leaned up to kiss him again, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. When they separated, she said, "We should discuss practical matters, the business, our future." Samuel nodded, though he seemed reluctant to release her. "What are you thinking?" "I want us to be true partners in every sense," Rebecca said. "In life and in business. I'd like to maintain my father's vision for the Silver Dollar, but perhaps expand it in ways he would approve. The musical evenings have been so successful, perhaps we could add other cultural events. And I'd like to continue teaching music to children who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity." "I think that's perfect," Samuel agreed. "The Silver Dollar is not just a saloon but a community center of sorts, especially during daylight hours." His expression grew serious. "And us? Would you consider marriage?" Rebecca's heart swelled with happiness. "Is that a proposal, Samuel Dean?" "A rather inelegant one," he admitted with a rueful smile. "I had planned something more romantic." "It's perfect," Rebecca assured him. "And yes, I would very much consider marriage. In fact, I accept." The winter passed in a blur of happiness for Rebecca and Samuel. Their engagement was announced at the Silver Dollar's Christmas celebration, to the delight of the staff and regular customers. Martha wept openly, declaring she'd known all along they were perfect for each other. William offered rare congratulations, while Jenny and the other servers immediately began planning wedding details. They were married in February in the church her father had helped build, with Reverend Walsh officiating and what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Rebecca wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver, while Samuel looked uncommonly handsome in a new suit. As they spoke their vows, Rebecca felt her father's presence strongly, his approval of the union and the continuation of his legacy. Morgan's competing establishment struggled through the winter, eventually closing in early spring. The building was purchased by a group of local businessmen, who approached Rebecca and Samuel about converting it into a proper hotel, something Silvercreek increasingly needed as the town continued to grow. They agreed to partner in the venture, expanding their business interests beyond the Silver Dollar. By summer, they had renovated the apartment above the saloon, creating a comfortable home that reflected both their tastes, Samuel's preference for sturdy, practical furnishings, balanced by Rebecca's more refined Eastern aesthetic. In the evenings, the sound of Rebecca's piano playing often drifted down to the saloon below, adding an elegant touch to the establishment. 5 years later, the Silver Dollar remained the heart of Silvercreek, now a thriving town with a railroad connection and growing prosperity. Rebecca and Samuel had expanded their family to include twin boys, James and William, who toddled through the saloon during quiet afternoons, beloved by staff and customers alike. Rebecca's music school, operated from a small building behind the Silver Dollar, had flourished, providing cultural education to the town's children. On a warm evening in July, Rebecca stood behind the bar beside Samuel, watching their customers enjoy the monthly musical performance now featuring several of her advanced students, alongside the professional musicians. Her father's portrait hung on the wall nearby, his eyes seeming to twinkle with approval at what his saloon had become. "Happy?" Samuel asked softly, his arm around her waist. Rebecca leaned into his embrace, thinking of the journey that had brought her here from the determined young woman ready to sell her inheritance and leave forever, to the woman she'd become, rooted in the community her father had helped build, in love with the man he'd trusted, continuing and expanding the legacy he'd left behind. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. "I came to Silvercreek ready to leave forever. I'm so glad you made me want to stay." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple, his love evident in the gesture. "Your father once told me that finding the right home is like finding the right person when it's meant to be. You just know." Rebecca smiled, watching their boys being doted on by Martha near the kitchen door, seeing their friends and neighbors enjoying the evening, feeling the solid presence of her husband beside her. Silvercreek had become her home, the Silver Dollar her legacy, Samuel and their children her heart. She had come west reluctantly, determined to sell her inheritance and return east as quickly as possible. Instead, she had found purpose, community, and a love deeper than she had ever thought possible. The Silver Dollar stood as a testament to her father's vision, now carried forward by his daughter and the man he had trusted, a cornerstone of Silvercreek, a gathering place for the community, and the foundation of a legacy that would continue for generations to come.